5 years ago, my life took an unexpected turn when I met Pierre. It was a Tuesday morning like any other at Tech Innovation, the technology company where I worked as a senior developer. The Parisian sun filtered through the large windows of our open office, illuminating the rows of computers and the focused faces of my colleagues. That day, our team leader, François, introduced us to a newcomer. This is Pierre, our new junior analyst. He just finished his master's degree in computer science and is joining our team to work on the Nexus project. Pierre was tall, with messy brown hair and green eyes sparkling with intelligence. His shy smile contrasted with the confidence of his handshake. "Pleased to meet you all," he said in a soft but firm voice. I didn't know yet how much this encounter would change my life. In the first few weeks, our interactions were purely professional. I helped him adapt to our work environment, explaining the subtleties of our system and the particularities of our project. Pierre was a quick learner, asking relevant questions and already bringing interesting ideas despite his lack of experience. One evening, as we were working late on a particularly stubborn bug, Pierre suggested we go for coffee. To clear our minds, he had said with a wink. I accepted, surprised by my own eagerness to spend time with him outside of work. That coffee turned into a conversation that lasted for hours. We talked about our backgrounds, our passions, our dreams. I discovered that Pierre was not only brilliant in his field, but also a passionate photographer and an Italian cuisine enthusiast. For my part, I told him about my love for hiking and my project to write a science fiction novel one day. From that moment on, something changed between us. Our lunch breaks became special moments where we would meet, sometimes joined by other colleagues, but often just the two of us. Our professional discussions were interspersed with private jokes and knowing looks. 3 months after his arrival, Pierre invited me to dinner. No colleagues, no work, just you and me, he had specified, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. I accepted without hesitation, my heart racing. That first date was magical. Pierre took me to a small Italian restaurant hidden in an alley in the Marais. The dim candlelight, the intoxicating aroma of fresh pasta, and the soft sound of violin in the background created a perfect romantic atmosphere. We talked for hours, laughing, sharing our hopes and fears. At the end of the evening, under a starry Parisian sky, Pierre kissed me for the first time. It was sweet, tender, and full of promises. Our relationship evolved quickly after that. We were like two puzzle pieces that fit together perfectly. Of course, working together while building a romantic relationship wasn't always easy. We had to learn to separate our professional life from our personal life, to not let disagreements at work affect our relationship. From the beginning, the financial question arose. As a senior developer, I earned significantly more than Pierre, but that was never a problem between us. We decided to split our common expenses fairly, each contributing according to our means. Pierre always insisted on paying his share, refusing to let me support him as he jokingly said. I may be just a humble junior analyst, he often told me, but I'm capable of paying my rent and my morning croissant. I really liked this attitude. I admired his pride and independence, while appreciating his willingness to build something fair between us. The 2 years that followed were a whirlwind of happiness. We moved in together after 6 months, transforming a small apartment in the 11th arrondissement into our love nest. We traveled together, discovering the beaches of the French Riviera and the Alps mountains. We overcame our first arguments, learned to communicate, to understand each other. And then, one summer evening, as we were picnicking by the Seine, Pierre proposed to me. He had prepared a little speech, but emotion overwhelmed him and he could only utter a few words interspersed with tears of joy. "Marie, I love you. Will you marry me?" I said yes without hesitation, my heart overflowing with love and excitement for our future together. Our wedding took place the following year, a simple but moving ceremony surrounded by our friends and families. That day, watching Pierre pronounce his vows, I knew I had made the right choice. Despite our differences, despite the challenges that awaited us, we were ready to face life together, as a team. 5 years after our first meeting, I look back with tenderness and gratitude. Our story is not a fairy tale, it's made of ups and downs, compromises and learning. But it's our story, and I wouldn't change it for anything in the world. As our relationship with Pierre strengthened day by day, my professional career took off spectacularly. The years following our marriage were marked by a series of successes and promotions that transformed my professional life in a spectacular way. It all started about 6 months after our wedding. I was still a senior developer at Tech Innovation, working on increasingly complex and ambitious projects. One morning, Francois, our team leader, called me into his office. "Marie," he said with a smile, "I have a proposition for you. We're launching a major new project for an important client, and I'd like you to take charge of it as project manager." I was both excited and intimidated by this opportunity. "Do you really think I'm ready for this?" I asked, a bit hesitant. Francois laughed. "Marie, you're more than ready. You've proven your technical skills many times, and your natural leadership is no secret to anyone here. It's time to take the next step." I accepted the challenge with enthusiasm. That same evening, I shared the news with Pierre over a candlelit dinner I had prepared for the occasion. "That's fantastic, my love," he exclaimed, raising his glass for a toast. "I knew you were going to climb the ladder quickly. You deserve it so much." The following months were intense. Managing a team of 10 people, coordinating different aspects of the project, communicating with the client, all of this was new to me. There were moments of doubt, sleepless nights working on seemingly unsolvable problems. But Pierre was always there to support me, patiently listening when I needed to vent my frustrations, encouraging me when I doubted myself. The project was a resounding success. Not only did we deliver on time and within budget, but the client was so satisfied that they immediately signed up for another even larger project. This success did not go unnoticed within the company. Less than a year after my promotion to project manager, I was summoned to the office of the general manager, Mr. Dubois. With Francois by his side, he announced that they wanted to promote me to the position of Chief Technology Officer. "Your performance as a project manager has been exceptional, Marie," Mr. Dubois said. "We believe you have the potential to lead our entire technology department." This promotion was beyond my wildest dreams. It came with a substantial salary increase that would triple my income in the space of 3 years. I was euphoric, but also a bit worried about how Pierre would react to this radical change in our financial dynamics. When I announced the news to him that evening, Pierre surprised me once again with his reaction. Instead of being jealous or uncomfortable, he was delighted for me. "I'm so proud of you, Marie," he said, hugging me tight. "You've worked so hard to get here. It's time to celebrate." We opened a bottle of champagne and spent the evening discussing what this promotion meant for us. Pierre insisted that we should continue to share our common expenses fairly, even if it meant that I would contribute much more to our joint savings. "What's yours is yours," he said. "I don't want you to feel obligated to spend more just because you earn more. We've always been equal in this relationship, and that shouldn't change." I was deeply touched by his attitude. Many men would have struggled to accept that their wife earned significantly more than them, but not Pierre. He was genuinely happy for me, and it only strengthened my love and respect for him. The months that followed were a whirlwind of activity. My new role as CTO was demanding, but incredibly rewarding. I had to learn to manage larger teams, develop long-term strategies for the company, negotiate with partners and suppliers. Each day brought new challenges and new learning opportunities. Meanwhile, Pierre's career was also progressing, albeit at a slower pace. He had been promoted to senior analyst and continued to do excellent work. We sometimes had conversations about how my promotion affected our dynamics at work, but we always managed to maintain a healthy separation between our professional and personal lives. With the significant increase in our income, we were able to realize one of our dreams: buying a house. We found a charming property in the Parisian suburbs, with a small garden and enough space to consider starting a family someday. The buying process was another opportunity for us to demonstrate our commitment to financial equality. Although I could have easily paid for the house alone, we decided to share the cost. Pierre insisted on contributing as much as he could, using all his savings and taking out a loan for his share. I respected his decision, understanding how important it was for him to feel that he was contributing significantly to our shared future. Our new house quickly became our sanctuary. After long days at the office, it was a pleasure to come home, cook together in our new kitchen, relax in our garden. We spent entire weekends painting the walls, arranging the rooms, transforming this house into our home. Despite the stress and long working hours that my new position entailed, I always made sure to maintain a balance between my professional and personal life. Pierre and I established a rule: no work after 8 p.m., except in absolute emergencies. We also started planning regular vacations, knowing it was important to take time for ourselves. One of my favorite moments from this period was a surprise trip that Pierre organized for our third wedding anniversary. He took me to a small village in Provence, where we spent a week exploring local markets, tasting wines, walking through lavender fields. Away from the stress of work, we were able to reconnect and remind ourselves why we got married. During this trip, we had an important conversation about our future. Sitting on the terrace of our hotel room, watching the sun set over the Provençal hills, we talked about our dreams and aspirations. "I know your career is important to you, Marie," Pierre said, "and I'm so proud of what you've accomplished. But I want you to know that for me, the most important thing is our happiness together. If you ever feel that your work is taking up too much space, don't hesitate to slow down. We don't need all this money to be happy." His words touched me deeply. "Thank you, Pierre," I replied. "You're right, our happiness comes first. I promise to always keep that in mind." Returning from this trip, I approached my work with a new perspective. Yes, I loved my role as CTO and I was proud of my accomplishments. But I also started to delegate more, to manage my time better, to ensure that my career didn't encroach on my personal life. 3 years after my promotion, I could look back with pride. Not only had I succeeded professionally, tripling my salary and successfully leading the company's technology department, but I had also managed to maintain a happy and balanced marriage. Pierre and I were stronger than ever, having gone through this period of change and growth together. As I looked at our comfortable home, thought about our solid relationship and our plans for the future, I felt deeply grateful. The rise of my career had been dizzying, but it was Pierre's constant support that had made it all possible. Together, we had proven that professional success and personal happiness could go hand in hand, as long as we kept the right priorities. With the rapid evolution of my career and the significant increase in my income, Pierre and I had to have a serious conversation about managing our finances. We agreed that our relationship was based on equality and mutual respect, and we wanted this to be reflected in our financial approach. One evening, after a quiet dinner at home, we settled in our living room, each with a glass of wine, ready to address this delicate subject. "Marie," Pierre began, "I think it's time we talk seriously about our financial situation. With your promotion and salary increase, things have changed a lot." I nodded, appreciating his frankness. "You're right. What do you propose?" Pierre took a deep breath. "I think we should continue to share household expenses equally. I know you earn much more than me now, but it's important to me to contribute equally to our life together." I was touched by his proposal. It was typical of Pierre to want to maintain his financial independence, even in the face of our growing income disparity. "I understand and respect that," I replied. "But are you sure it won't be too much of a burden for you? I don't want you to end up short of money just to maintain this equality." Pierre smiled. "Don't worry about me. My salary has also increased, even if not in the same proportions as yours. I can handle my share of expenses without problem." So we decided to maintain our initial arrangement: each would contribute equally to household expenses. This included mortgage payments, bills, groceries, and current expenses related to our home. However, we also agreed that for large purchases or vacations, we could adjust our contribution according to our respective means. It was a compromise that allowed us to maintain fairness while recognizing the reality of our financial situation. "And what about the rest of your salary?" Pierre asked. "You're going to have a significant surplus each month." I thought for a moment before answering. I was thinking of setting it aside for our future. Maybe invest part of it, and keep the rest as a precautionary savings. Pierre nodded approvingly. "That's an excellent idea. But I think we should keep our personal finances separate. What's yours is yours, Marie. You've worked hard for this salary, You should be able to dispose of it as you wish. This decision to keep our personal finances separate turned out to be one of the most important aspects of our agreement. It allowed us to maintain a certain financial independence while sharing household responsibilities fairly. In the months that followed, I started to implement a rigorous savings and investment plan. I opened several savings accounts, each dedicated to a specific goal, one for emergencies, one for our future projects, like having children or traveling, and one for our retirement. I also started to take a serious interest in investments. I read books, took online courses, and even consulted a financial advisor to help me develop a diversified investment strategy. I invested in a mix of stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, always making sure to maintain a balance between risk and security. Throughout this process, I kept Pierre informed of my financial decisions, even though we had agreed that these funds belonged to me. I wanted him to know that I was thinking about our shared future, even if I was managing this money independently. You know, I told him one evening as we were discussing my latest investments, all this money I'm setting aside, it's for both of us. I want us to have a secure financial future, together. Pierre squeezed my hand affectionately. I know, my love. And I'm grateful for that. But don't forget to enjoy a little too. You've worked hard for this salary, you deserve to treat yourself from time to time. Following his advice, I started to allow myself a few small luxuries. I bought a watch I had been coveting for a long time, I treated myself to regular spa sessions to manage the stress of my work, and I even took photography classes, a passion I had always wanted to explore. However, I always made sure not to flaunt these personal expenses in front of Pierre. I didn't want him to feel uncomfortable or think I was wasting our money. Our financial arrangement worked well because we mutually respected each other's choices and privacy. One day, Pierre came home with a worried expression. He confessed to me that he sometimes felt guilty for not being able to contribute as much as I did to our joint savings. I know it's irrational, he said, but sometimes I wonder if I'm doing enough for our future. I took his hands in mine. Pierre, listen to me. You contribute enormously to our life together. Not just financially, but in 1,000 other ways. Your support, your love, your understanding, all of that is worth more than any amount of money. These open and honest conversations about our finances strengthened our relationship. We learned to communicate more effectively about sensitive topics, to express our concerns and hopes, and to find solutions together. Over time, our financial arrangement became second nature. We shared household expenses equally, while maintaining financial independence for the rest. This approach allowed us to maintain a healthy balance in our relationship, avoiding tensions that could have arisen if one of us had felt like we were carrying all the financial weight. However, there was one aspect of our financial agreement that I kept secret: the true extent of my savings and investments. It wasn't out of lack of trust in Pierre, but rather out of respect for our decision to keep our personal finances separate. I knew Pierre was proud and independent, and I didn't want him to feel diminished or uncomfortable knowing the extent of my growing wealth. Sometimes, I wondered if I was making the right choice by keeping this information to myself. But every time I saw Pierre happy and satisfied with our arrangement, I reassured myself that it was the best decision for our couple. One evening, as we were celebrating our 5th wedding anniversary, Pierre surprised me with an unexpected gift, a finely chiseled silver bracelet that I had admired months ago in a shop window. "How could you afford this?" I asked, stunned. Pierre smiled proudly. "I've been setting money aside for months. I wanted to give you something special, something that shows that I too can contribute to our happiness." This gesture deeply moved me. It reminded me that our financial agreement wasn't just about money, but also about love, respect, and mutual desire to contribute to our shared happiness. As I watched the bracelet sparkle on my wrist, I realized how much our financial arrangement had strengthened our relationship. It had taught us to communicate openly, to respect each other's independence, and to work together. As I watched the bracelet sparkle on my wrist, I realized how much our financial arrangement had strengthened our relationship. It had taught us to communicate openly, to respect each other's independence, and to work together towards common goals. Certainly, our situation wasn't conventional. Many couples might have chosen to pool all their income together. But for us, This partial separation of our finances, combined with a fair sharing of responsibilities, was the key to a harmonious and balanced relationship. Ultimately, our financial agreement was much more than just a division of expenses. It was an expression of our commitment to each other, our mutual respect, and our desire to build a future together, each bringing our unique contribution to our shared happiness. Madame Leclerc, Pierre's mother, had always been an imposing figure in our lives. From the beginning of our relationship, I felt that she had difficulty fully accepting me. She was a woman in her 60s, with impeccably styled grey hair, always elegantly dressed, and endowed with a strong personality that left no one indifferent. I still remember our first meeting, a few months after the start of my relationship with Pierre. We were invited to dinner at her place, in her posh apartment in the 16th arrondissement of Paris. As soon as I crossed the threshold, I felt her scrutinizing gaze sizing me up from head to toe. "So, you're Marie," she had said in a tone that was meant to be polite but didn't completely hide her disapproval. "Pierre has told me a lot about you." The dinner that followed was a succession of barely veiled questions about my origins, my education, and my ambitions. I did my best to remain courteous and open, but I could feel that each of my answers was carefully analyzed and judged. Over the years, our relations remained cordial but tense. Madame Leclerc always seemed to find something to criticize about me. My way of dressing wasn't elegant enough for her taste, my cooking wasn't refined enough, my manners weren't distinguished enough. Despite all my efforts to gain her approval, nothing seemed sufficient. Pierre, caught between his mother and me, did his best to keep the peace. He often tried to temper his mother's criticisms of me, but that only reinforced her conviction that I was a bad influence on her son. "You've always been so ambitious, Pierre," I sometimes heard her say. "I don't understand why you're content with this analyst position when you could aim so much higher." These remarks hurt me deeply. Not only did they question Pierre's life choices, but they also insinuated that I was somehow responsible for what she perceived as a lack of ambition on his part. The situation reached its peak during a visit from Madame Leclerc to our home, about 3 years after our marriage. It was a Sunday afternoon, and we had invited her for tea. Pierre had gone out to run a last-minute errand, leaving me alone with her for a few minutes. As I was preparing tea in the kitchen, Madame Leclerc entered, her gaze scrutinizing every corner of the room. "This is a nice house you have here," she commented in a tone that suggested otherwise. "It must have cost a small fortune." I smiled politely, trying not to let myself be destabilized. "We're very happy here. Pierre and I worked hard to be able to afford it." It was then that her gaze fell on a bank statement that I had carelessly left on the counter. Before I could react, she had grabbed it and was glancing at it. "What's this?" she asked, her eyes widening as she saw the figures. "Why are there 2 separate bank accounts?" I felt my heart racing. Our financial arrangement had always been a private matter between Pierre and me, and I wasn't prepared to discuss it with his mother. "Madame Leclerc," I began, trying to keep my calm, "this is a personal document. Pierre and I have our own financial arrangements that suit us perfectly." But she wasn't listening to me. Her face had hardened, her lips pinched into a thin line of disapproval. "I see what's going on here," she said accusingly. "You're keeping your money for yourself, aren't you? You're taking advantage of my son." I was stunned by this accusation. "That's not it at all," I protested. "Pierre and I contribute equally to our common expenses. We've simply chosen to keep part of our finances separate." But Madame Leclerc wouldn't hear any of it. She was convinced she had discovered proof of my supposed manipulation of her son. "I always knew you weren't good enough for Pierre," she spat. "Now I have proof. You're letting him pay half of everything while you probably earn much more than him. It's pure exploitation." I was about to reply when Pierre returned. Seeing our tense expressions and the bank statement in his mother's hand, he immediately understood that something was wrong. "What's going on here?" he asked, his gaze passing from his mother to me. "Your mother saw our bank statement," I explained, trying to keep my calm. "She thinks our financial arrangement is unfair." Pierre took a deep breath, visibly uncomfortable. "Mom, our finances are a private matter between Marie and me. We are perfectly satisfied with our arrangement." But Madame Leclerc wasn't ready to let go. "Pierre, my dear, open your eyes. This woman is manipulating you. She's keeping all her money for herself while you pay half of everything. It's not fair. I saw the pain and confusion in Pierre's eyes. He was torn between his love for me and his respect for his mother. I wanted to intervene, to explain, but I realized it wasn't my place to do so. It was up to Pierre to defend our choice. And that's exactly what he did. In a calm but firm voice, he said, "Mom, I love you, but you need to understand that Marie and I are adults capable of making our own decisions. Our financial arrangement suits us perfectly. Marie isn't manipulating me, she's not taking advantage of me. We are equal partners in this marriage." Madame Leclerc seemed momentarily speechless, shocked by her son's firmness. Then, regaining her composure, she said, "I see she has completely indoctrinated you. Can't you see she's manipulating you?" It was too much for me. With tears in my eyes, I left the room, unable to bear any more accusations. I heard Pierre ask his mother to leave, followed by the sound of the front door closing. A few minutes later, Pierre joined me in our bedroom. He took me in his arms, whispering apologies for his mother's behavior. We stayed like that for a long time, seeking comfort in each other's presence. This confrontation left deep scars. The weeks that followed were tense, with Pierre torn between his love for me and his filial duty. Madame Leclerc continued to make disparaging remarks about me whenever she had the chance, convinced she was acting in her son's best interest. I tried not to let this situation affect our marriage, but it was difficult. I constantly felt judged, questioned. Sometimes, I wondered if our financial arrangement was really fair, if I shouldn't have insisted on pooling everything together. But every time these doubts assailed me, I remembered why we had made this choice. It was about mutual respect, independence, and trust. Our financial arrangement wasn't just about money, it was an expression of our vision of marriage and life together. Despite the tensions with his mother, Pierre remained firm in his support of our decision. He even took the initiative to have a serious conversation with her, explaining our arrangement in detail and asking her to respect our choices. This difficult period ultimately strengthened our couple. We learned to present a united front in the face of adversity, to defend our choices and our vision of life. And even if relations with my mother-in-law remained tense, Pierre and I were more united than ever. Madame Leclerc's interference in our financial affairs was a trial, but it also allowed us to reaffirm our commitment to each other and the strength of our relationship. We proved that our love and mutual trust were stronger than outside judgments, even those coming from family. The weeks following the confrontation with Madame Leclerc were tense. Pierre and I felt like we were walking on eggshells, carefully avoiding the subject of his mother and our finances. However, I sensed that something had changed. Pierre seemed preoccupied, distant at times, as if he was carrying a heavy burden. One evening, as we were dining in silence, I decided to break the ice. "Pierre, what's wrong? You seem so distant lately." He put down his fork, his gaze avoiding mine. "Marie, my mother has called me several times this week. She insists that we review our financial arrangement." My heart tightened. "And what do you think about that?" Pierre sighed deeply. "I don't know what to think anymore. She says I should assert myself, that I shouldn't contribute as much to household expenses given that you earn much more than me." I was stunned. After all these years, after all our discussions about equality and mutual respect, had his mother managed to sow doubt in his mind? "Pierre," I said softly, "you know that our arrangement has always been based on equality and mutual respect. We discussed this at length and agreed that it was the best solution for us." He nodded, but I could see he was torn. "I know, Marie. But my mother says I'm being exploited, that I should benefit from your financial success. She thinks I should stop contributing to household expenses for a while, to see how you would react." I was flabbergasted. Not only was Madame Leclerc continuing to interfere in our lives, but she was now suggesting that Pierre test our relationship. It was as if she was deliberately trying to create tension between us. "And what do you think about that?" I asked, my throat tight. Pierre ran a hand through his hair, visibly uncomfortable. "I don't know, Marie. Part of me knows that our current arrangement is fair and equitable. But another part of me wonders if my mother is right. Maybe I should benefit more from your financial success. I felt anger rising within me, but I did my best to stay calm. Pierre, our marriage isn't about who benefits from whom. We are partners, equals. Our financial arrangement reflects that. But I could see that my words weren't enough to dispel his doubts. The following days were difficult. Pierre was becoming more and more distant, spending long hours on the phone with his mother. I knew she continued to pressure him, to sow doubt in his mind. One evening, about 2 weeks after our first discussion, Pierre came home from work with a determined expression on his face. My heart tightened, anticipating what was to come. "Marie," he said, sitting across from me, "I've made a decision. I'm not going to contribute to household expenses for a while." Despite expecting it, his words hit me like a punch. "Pierre, you can't be serious. It's your mother who put this idea in your head, isn't it?" He looked away. "My mother has nothing to do with this. It's my decision. I think it's fair that you take on more financial responsibilities, given that you earn much more than me." I was in shock. How had we come to this? How could Pierre question everything we had built together? "And what do you plan to do with the money you won't be spending on the household?" I asked, trying to keep my calm. Pierre shrugged. "I'm going to set it aside, maybe invest it. My mother thinks it would be a good idea for me to start building my own financial security." His mother's words. Again and again. I felt anger rising within me, but I suppressed it. Getting angry would only make things worse. "Pierre," I said softly, "I understand that you want to take care of your personal finances. But don't you think this decision goes against everything we've built together? Our marriage is based on equality and mutual respect, not on who earns the most." He looked uncomfortable, but he stood his ground. "I know it may seem unfair, Marie. But I think it's necessary. Just for a while, to see how it goes." I realized at that moment that Pierre was determined to go through with this experiment. Whatever I said, he wouldn't change his mind. His mother's manipulation had borne fruit. The days that followed were difficult. Pierre stopped contributing to household expenses, leaving me to manage everything alone. At first, I tried to maintain our usual standard of living, hoping that Pierre would quickly realize the absurdity of the situation. But as the weeks went by, I began to feel the weight of this additional financial burden. It wasn't so much a question of money, I had the means to cover all our expenses. It was rather the principle that hurt me. Every bill I paid alone, every shopping trip I made without his contribution, was a painful reminder of how our relationship had changed. Pierre, for his part, seemed almost relieved. He talked enthusiastically about the investments he was making with the money he was saving, following his mother's advice. He didn't seem to realize how much his behavior was hurting me. One evening, about a month after the start of this new arrangement, I decided I had had enough. I waited for Pierre to come home from work and confronted him. "Pierre," I said firmly, "we need to talk. This situation can't continue." He looked surprised. "What are you talking about?" I thought everything was fine. I took a deep breath to calm myself. "No, Pierre, everything is not fine. This new financial arrangement is destroying our marriage. You may not see it, but with each passing day, I feel more like your banker than your wife." Pierre looked shocked. "But I thought this was what you wanted. My mother said you would be happy to be able to contribute more, given that you earn more." I shook my head, tears in my eyes. "Your mother doesn't understand anything about our relationship, Pierre. It's not about money. It's about respect, equality, partnership. By stopping contributing, you've broken that balance." Pierre remained silent for a moment, seeming to reflect on my words. Then, slowly, I saw understanding dawn on his face. "Oh God, Marie," he murmured. "I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. I was so focused on trying to prove something to my mother that I didn't see what I was doing to our marriage. It was as if a dam had broken. All the emotions I had repressed over the past few weeks came pouring out. I cried, I shouted, I expressed all my frustration and pain. And Pierre listened to me, really listened, for the first time in weeks. When I finally finished, exhausted but relieved, Pierre took me in his arms. "I'm so sorry, Marie," he repeated. I've been stupid. I let my mother manipulate me, make me doubt us. But you're right. Our marriage is based on equality and mutual respect. I want to go back to our old arrangement." I nodded, relieved but still hurt. "Pierre, I'm glad you finally understand. But this can't happen again. We need to establish clear boundaries with your mother. She can't continue to interfere in our marriage like this." Pierre nodded solemnly. "You're right. I'll have a serious conversation with her. I'll make her understand that our financial decisions are ours and ours alone." That night, as we lay side by side in our bed, I realized how close we had come to disaster. Madame Leclerc's plan had almost succeeded in separating us. But in the end, our love and commitment to each other had proven stronger than her manipulations. The next morning, Pierre kept his word. He called his mother and made it clear to her that her interference in our marriage had to stop. It wasn't an easy conversation. I heard raised voices and protests, but Pierre remained firm. When he hung up, he looked exhausted but relieved. "It's done," he said. "I told her that our financial decisions were ours and that if she couldn't respect them, we would have to limit our contact." I was proud of him. I knew how difficult it must have been for him to stand up to his mother. But it was necessary to preserve our marriage and our happiness. In the days that followed, we worked together to re-establish our old financial arrangement. Pierre started contributing equally to household expenses again, and we even decided to be more open with each other about our personal finances. This experience, as painful as it was, ultimately brought us closer together. We learned to communicate more effectively about sensitive topics, to express our concerns and hopes, and to find solutions together. Over time, our financial arrangement became second nature. We shared household expenses equally, while maintaining financial independence for the rest. This approach allowed us to maintain a healthy balance in our relationship, avoiding tensions that could have arisen if one of us had felt like we were carrying all the financial weight. However, there was one aspect of our financial agreement that I kept secret: the true extent of my savings and investments. It wasn't out of lack of trust in Pierre, but rather out of respect for our decision to keep our personal finances separate. I knew Pierre was proud and independent, and I didn't want him to feel diminished or uncomfortable knowing the extent of my growing wealth. Sometimes, I wondered if I was making the right choice by keeping this information to myself. But every time I saw Pierre happy and satisfied with our arrangement, I reassured myself that it was the best decision for our couple. One evening, as we were celebrating our 5th wedding anniversary, Pierre surprised me with an unexpected gift: a finely chiseled silver bracelet that I had admired months ago in a shop window. "How could you afford this?" I asked, stunned. Pierre smiled proudly. "I've been setting money aside for months. I wanted to give you something special, something that shows that I too can contribute to our happiness." This gesture deeply moved me. It reminded me that our financial agreement wasn't just about money, but also about love, respect, and mutual desire to contribute to our shared happiness. As I watched the bracelet sparkle on my wrist, I realized how much our financial arrangement had strengthened our relationship. It had taught us to communicate openly, to respect each other's independence, and to work together towards common goals. Certainly, our situation wasn't conventional. Many couples might have chosen to pool all their income together. But for us, this partial separation of our finances, combined with a fair sharing of responsibilities, was the key to a harmonious and balanced relationship. In the end, our financial agreement was much more than just a division of expenses. It was an expression of our commitment to each other, our mutual respect, and our desire to build a future together, each bringing our unique contribution to our shared happiness. As we celebrated our 7th wedding anniversary, Pierre and I took a moment to reflect on our journey. Sitting on the terrace of our house, watching the sun set over the garden we had carefully tended together, we realized how much we had grown, individually and as a couple. "You know, Marie," Pierre said, taking my hand, "I wouldn't change anything that happened. As difficult as it was at times, every trial has made us stronger, more united." I squeezed his hand back, feeling my heart overflow with love and gratitude. "I agree. We've been through the fire together, and we've come out forged into a stronger alloy than ever." As we looked towards the future, we knew that other challenges surely awaited us. But we were ready to face them, together, armed with the love, trust, and mutual understanding we had cultivated through these trials. Our story wasn't a fairy tale, but it was ours. A story of love, growth, challenges overcome, and lessons learned. And as the sun disappeared over the horizon, painting the sky in golden and pink hues, we knew that the best was yet to come.